Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. My son ignored my heart surgery and went on a cruise with his wife, and then I. My name is Helen Morrison, I am 66 years old. Widowed for 7 years, I raised my only son, Jason, with all the love, rigor and sacrifices that a mother can offer. My husband, Robert, was a gentle man, full of humor and generosity. His sudden death at 48 from a heart attack was a devastating blow. Jason was only 12 years old. I remember that exact day, that gray morning when the phone rang and my whole world came crashing down. Since then, I have become the pillar of our family. Every day, I fought to ensure Jason had everything he needed. I got up at dawn, did the shopping, prepared his meals, helped him with his homework, made sure he always had clean, suitable clothes, and made sure his life was normal, despite the invisible pain of our absence. I often put my own needs aside. I never took a vacation, I never thought about myself. When I got sick, I forced myself to move forward. My health was a luxury I couldn't afford. My son's happiness was my top priority. But the years passed. The wear and tear of time and exhaustion finally took its toll. A dull fatigue, shortness of breath that I initially attributed to stress and age. Then came irregular chest pains that sometimes worried me. I put off going to the doctor. After all, I didn't have time to waste. I had to be strong. One winter afternoon, as the first snowflakes began to fall on Chicago, I finally decided to consult a cardiologist, Dr. Lewis. His office was warm, but the atmosphere heavy, laden with silent worries. I remember the gray light filtering through the window, the steady ticking of the clock on the wall, and the doctor's serious look as he said to me, "Helen, your mitral valve is badly damaged. You need open heart surgery. It's a serious procedure, but necessary. If we wait too long, the risks increase." The words hit me like a clap of thunder. I felt a huge weight land on my chest, almost as strong as the physical pain I'd been feeling for the past few weeks. It was as if my entire body froze in a suspended moment. But more than fear, it was Jason's image that came to mind. His face, his eyes full of promise, his smile that I wanted to protect at all costs. How could I tell him that his mother was going to have to face such a dangerous battle? How could I tell him that this time, it wasn't just a passing fatigue, but a battle for life? I knew I had to talk to him about it. Quickly. Because silence would be even worse. But deep down, a dull fear crept inside me. Would he really listen? Would he understand? It was the beginning of a difficult path, one I never imagined I would have to travel alone. A few days after my appointment with the cardiologist, I summoned all the courage I had and called Jason. It was late in the day, after his job as a lawyer at a large Chicago firm, a job that kept him constantly busy, with endless meetings, urgent cases, and impossible deadlines. When he answered, his voice was fast, almost breathless, as it always was when he was stressed. In the background, I could hear the dull thud of a phone in a cafe, or perhaps the sound of a business conversation. He seemed hurried, distant. "Hello, Mom, is everything okay?" he asked. I took a deep breath, feeling the lump in my throat tighten. Then, slowly, I began to tell him what Dr. Lewis had told me. The seriousness of the situation, the necessity of open heart surgery, the fragility of my condition. I expected him to pause, to ask questions, to ask how I was going to handle this, to reassure me. But that wasn't the case. "Mom, is this serious? Are you okay?" he replied, almost distracted. I felt my heart sink. I replied that yes, I was fine, but that I would have to have surgery soon. "Okay," he said quickly, "we'll handle this." Then he added, almost as if to change the subject, "Candace and I booked a cruise for the first week of your surgery. We've been talking about it for a year, it's important to us." I remained silent for a moment, surprised and hurt. I had imagined my son would tell me he would help me, be there for me, cancel his plans if necessary. But he was talking about a trip, a personal pleasure, at the precise moment when I was about to go through a serious ordeal. I tried to explain, my voice trembling, that I needed them, that their presence would be an essential support for me. That their absence, at that moment, would hurt. But Jason cut him short, in a firm and definitive tone. "Don't worry, Mom. There are doctors, nurses. It's not like you're alone. We can't cancel this trip. You'll be fine, I'm sure of it." I said nothing. I didn't want to push the issue. The pain in my chest wasn't just from my sick heart, but from the immense emptiness growing between us. That conversation left an invisible scar. The day I needed him most, Jason had already chosen to be somewhere else, far from me, far from my struggle. On May 8th, the dreaded day finally arrived. That morning, I entered the hospital. Solitaire, a light suitcase in hand, my heart heavy with anxiety and fatigue. The staff welcomed me with a professional gentleness that could not fill this immense void inside me. The night before the operation, I barely slept a wink of sleep. Lying in my hospital bed, the dim light barely filtering through the curtains, my mind was racing. I thought back to all those years of struggle, to being a single mother that had required so much energy and sacrifice. I saw Jason's face again, so busy, so distant, leaving on a cruise with his wife at the very moment I was about to face this battle for my life. My heartbeat, irregular and tired, seemed to echo in the silence of the room. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, counting the minutes, wondering how this operation would change the course of my life. And, above all, how I would be able to bear the absence of those I loved. When the staff finally came to get me, I squeezed the nurse's hand, searching for a spark of comfort in her eyes. But inside, a dull fear gnawed at me. The 5 long hours of surgery passed in a fog. When I left the operating room, still weak and misty-eyed, I hoped, deep down, for a call, a message, a sign. But Jason didn't call me once. Not a word. Not an audible thought. Yet I knew he was there, far away, on a sun-drenched cruise ship, sipping cocktails on a luxurious deck, surrounded by friends, far from my suffering. The only contact I received was a brief, almost cold message from Candace. "We're thinking of you, rest well, kisses." A message that sounded hollow, powerless in the face of what I was going through. The days that followed were the most difficult of my life. Physical pain confined me to my bed, the medication clouded my mind, and fear of failure, fear of loneliness, intruded on every moment. Every morning, I opened my eyes with the secret hope of hearing my phone ring. Every night, I fell asleep in silence, my heart heavy. In that hospital room, a nurse, gentle and patient, became my pillar of strength. She spoke to me tenderly, held my hand when the pain was too great, helped me get up, wash myself, and gradually regain control of my body. A volunteer often came to visit me. She brought a book of poetry with her and read me verses that sometimes made my tears dance, other times lit a small flame of hope. But the truth was there, I was alone. I cried, silently, every time the door closed, every time the footsteps moved away, every time no one looked. I mourned the absent mother, the departed son, the lost time, and the crushing feeling of being forgotten as I fought to stay alive. When I got home from the hospital, I opened the door with a mixture of hope and exhaustion, but what I felt as I crossed the threshold was an icy, heavy silence. The house no longer breathed life or family warmth, it seemed suspended in silent waiting, as if it itself wanted me to leave, to turn the page once and for all. The walls, once filled with laughter and lively conversation, now echoed back to me with a dull, empty voice. Every room reminded me of absence, every object seemed to bear the weight of shattered memories. I paused in the living room, looking around at the photos hanging on the wall and placed on the furniture. These images of birthdays, Christmases, moments shared between Jason, Candace, and me, tugged at my heartstrings. I knew I could no longer remain a prisoner of these memories that were doing me as much harm as good. So, with a newfound determination, I began to take them down, one by one. I took each frame, each photo, and gently placed them in a large cardboard box. It wasn't an act of anger, but a protective one, as if I were sheltering these precious moments, far from my immediate pain. I then gathered all their gifts, their old letters, the little mementos I had accumulated over the years. I wrapped each item carefully, placed them in the same box, and then stored it in a locked cupboard, as if to keep their memory at a distance, but without ever destroying them. Then I made an even more radical decision. I called a real estate agency. The agent's voice, professional, echoed strangely in the empty house. I asked to sell the house. The one where I had raised Jason, where we had experienced so many parties, laughter, and sometimes arguments. This house, which had been the setting for my life, my hopes and disappointments, was about to become a symbol of the past, a chapter one had to close in order to move forward. A few weeks later, I left Chicago to settle in a small town in Vermont, far from the noise, the hustle and bustle, and the memories that were too heavy to bear. My new home was modest, a small wooden building surrounded by tall trees and a wild garden where nature had reclaimed its rights. It was simple, warm, and peaceful. I needed to find myself again, to heal far from the ghosts of the past, in this refuge that I was building stone by stone, day after day. In this new peaceful environment, surrounded by nature and far from the hustle and bustle of my past life, I rediscovered a passion that I had put aside for years, the painting. At first, it was simply a way to pass the time, a way to calm my tormented mind. But quickly, each painting became a true outlet. With my brushes, I let flow onto the canvas all the emotions I couldn't express with words, the dull anger, the deep sadness, but also this new strength growing within me. I painted women, strong, resilient women, often marked by pain but in the process of rebuilding. Faces with deep gazes, broken hearts that were gradually regaining their ability to love and hope. My colors were sometimes dark, sometimes vibrant, always sincere. These works, born from my wounds and my rebirth, soon attracted the attention of a local gallery. The owners, touched by the power and authenticity of my paintings, offered to exhibit them in their space. It was a decisive moment. Seeing my work recognized and heard gave me new confidence. Gradually, my creativity was no longer limited to painting. I began to write. First, a diary, in which I recorded my thoughts, my pain, and my hopes. Then, encouraged by friends and by the deep desire to share my story, I began writing a book. This book was titled, Forgotten Love, Memoirs of a Wounded Mother. In it, I recounted my journey, my solitude, my struggles, my disappointments, but also my resilience and my rebirth. To my surprise, the book was met with intense emotion. I received hundreds of messages, letters, and calls from women across the country who had experienced similar experiences, abandonment, family wounds, silent betrayals. They identified with my words and found in my story the strength to confront their own pain. This unexpected sharing gave me a new lease of life, a new meaning to my life. I understood then that my suffering could become a source of hope for others. One day, while giving a talk to a packed room on resilience and inner strength, my phone vibrated in my pocket. The audience's eyes were fixed on me, hanging on every word, every story I told. I had spent the last few minutes describing how I had transformed my pain into strength, how I had learned to rebuild myself despite the wounds of my past. I took a deep breath and picked up. It was Jason. Her voice trembled, fragile, hesitant, almost broken by emotion and guilt. Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't know how much you were hurting. I didn't want you to feel alone. We made a mistake, a huge mistake. These words, simple but heavy with meaning, resonated within me like a door ajar onto a possible forgiveness, a chance to rebuild. I heard in his voice all the pain, the shame, perhaps even the fear of not being forgiven. But I had changed. I was no longer the mother who was available at all hours, ready to forgive everything unconditionally. I was no longer the one who put her own needs aside for the needs of others. I had become Helen, a woman who had chosen herself, who had learned to live for herself, to set limits, to demand respect. I answered him calmly and firmly. Jason, I still love you. But love isn't always enough to mend what's broken. What I want isn't just an apology, but respect, presence, truth. Not words, but actions. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, then he whispered a low, "I understand." This moment was a turning point. Today, I live a life filled with peace and meaning, a life I would never have imagined just a few years ago. Every week, I organize workshops for women who, like me, have been hurt by their families, abandoned, or misunderstood. These gatherings are much more than just meetings, they are sacred spaces where we can share our pain without judgment, where we learn to heal broken hearts, soothe tormented minds, and rebuild fragile lives. I accompany these women on the path to resilience, offering them tools to regain self-confidence, to recover, to love themselves despite their wounds. Seeing their transformation, their rebirth, has become my greatest source of joy and pride. As for Jason, our relationship is a daily work in progress, a slow but sincere process. We take the time, gently and patiently, to rebuild this broken bond. He has become a different man, more attentive, more humble, finally aware of what his absence may have cost me. He learns to listen, to understand, to be present without waiting, without conditions. And me? I became Helen, a strong, proud woman who discovered that true strength does not come from others, nor even from circumstances, but from the love we have for ourselves. Unconditional love, a love that heals, that uplifts, that liberates. Every day I remind myself that, despite the wounds of the past, I can choose peace, dignity, light. And it is this choice that gives me the strength to move forward.